If you think about a lot of these people who are working remotely, there are a lot of distractions at home. It could be laundry, YouTube. The same is true of a lot of isolated co-working spaces. But when we bring these people together and they see everyone else working extremely hard and very focused, they elevate their game. And so it's contagious in that way, and it elevates everyone who comes to be more productive.
Welcome to The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods, a podcast at the nexus of hospitality, business, culture, and the mind. Now here's your host, Woolco Foods CEO, Stephen Toberoff.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods. I am your host, Stephen Toberoff, and today I'm very much looking forward to my conversation because it involves a number of subjects that I think are both incredibly timely, but perhaps more importantly, I think subjects that are going to become more and more relevant and important as we head into 2026. So without further ado, I want to introduce Jason Malefakis, who is the founder of Wayo. Jason, thanks so much for coming in today and speaking with me.
Thanks for having me on, Stephen.
So what I'd like to do, just sort of the beginning, Jason, is can you tell us a little bit about what Wayo is and how it intersects with the hospitality, the event space, and some of the other dynamics that are inherent in what you're doing?
Absolutely. So Wayo can be thought of as an Airbnb for workspace. And so we curate communities and we bring them together to boost productivity and bring new daytime revenue to restaurants during their slowest hours.
So when you say bring revenue to restaurants during slower hours, I'm really interested in this because it's a trend I've been following for a while, more under the category of restaurant utilization of space in novel ways. So whether that's lectures on tap. So when you say using the restaurant space during underutilized hours, can you talk a little bit more about what that would look like and how that would be of benefit to restaurants in ways they may not currently be thinking of?
Right. So restaurants are sitting on a gold mine between the hours of 9 and 5. They rarely monetize those midday hours, and Wayo converts those tables into new daytime revenue without disrupting their normal service. And so the way we do that is most people who are remote workers or hybrid workers are working either at home or in different types of co-working spaces, cafes during the day. And for various reasons, which we can get into, a lot of those are not ideal workspaces for them. And so we take those people, curate different communities for them, and bring them to these host venues at their slowest times.
What I like about that is, well, first of all, I think one of the main attributes that make restaurants so desirable is the ability for people to get together in person. And I think a lot of restaurant owners, bar owners, although they're starting to gain greater awareness of it, don't fully appreciate that one of the attributes of their business is being an event space. So as you work with these restaurants, how has the reception been so far? And what, if any, are some of the objections? Or to put it in a different way, what has the feedback been from a positive standpoint as you roll this out and share this opportunity with restaurants?
I completely agree. I think hospitality is the largest untapped workspace in the category in America. And restaurants and hotels already have that ambiance and infrastructure. And Wayo essentially brings the use case. In terms of the places we've worked with, it not only brings them new daytime revenue, which they love because they would not normally be getting these customers in, but it also brings them new marketing. So these are people who may not know about their location, their restaurant, their rooftop, and we're introducing it to them. And they're spending a longer period of time there. So they're spending nearly 8 hours a day there, and they're interacting with people high up in these restaurants. A lot of the managers and the owners are there during the day, and they're building relationships. And so that turns them into repeat customers. It turns them into, and these are business owners a lot of the times, it turns them into people who are going to come back and book high margin events. So we see it really benefiting the spaces, the host venues, And I'll talk a little bit more later about how it benefits the demand side of it. In terms of the objections, sometimes we get, let's call it an old style thinker who says, we are a restaurant and we will do nothing else. There's nothing you can do about that. You move on and find someone who really wants to think about creative ways they can use their space. Some of the others are, it really depends on specific logistical items. So we a lot of times bring Wi-Fi that's very high quality to make sure that everyone who's on a call never gets interrupted. But if there are other things like, okay, we need someone in there from 9 to 11 before we open, and we can't do that, that may be an objection. Another one is we think this may turn us into a laptop haven. And we say, a lot of the spaces that we have have private rooms where it's separated from the rest of the restaurant. And we always bring in professionals so they know who they're getting ahead of time. And it's not people just streaming in from the street and throwing a laptop up and ordering nothing, contributing nothing to the business.
Yeah, I like it because I think a lot of times restaurants and people who have a hospitality business in New York forget to take note of the fact of how valuable it is that they have a brick and mortar event space presence and that every minute of every day is a potential opportunity. I also like what you said about giving the restaurants an opportunity to use this as a really effective marketing tool because in such a competitive business, if you can cultivate a stream of demand that you're not traditionally getting. So let's say you're a restaurant that traditionally caters to regulars, and now all of a sudden you've opened yourself up to businesses for after work, or perhaps tourists, or perhaps other segments of the market. Now, before we get deeper into this, and I normally begin interviews like this, but I wanted to have an introduction about Wayo. What I'd like you to do, Jason, please, is just tell the audience a little bit about yourself and how it was that you came to this idea and what made you want to pursue this as a business objective.
Absolutely. So I do not come from a hospitality background. I grew up in New York. I went to Michigan, played baseball there, and went to the undergraduate business school, got a BBA. I worked in corporate finance. Then I went into the hedge fund world at Blackstone and Rentec, did a bunch of hedge fund technology and operations work. And then through COVID, my wife and I were living in a one-bedroom apartment, and it was 7 days a week in the same space. And so we wanted to be able to change our environment, explore different places at least once, maybe twice a week. And so started going to coffee shops, tried out a bunch of different co-working spaces. And we talked to hundreds of people there intentionally because most people do not talk in those environments. And we essentially found that everyone pretends that coffee shops provide community, but they turn out to be a very lonely place. It's essentially an illusion. It's a VR headset because you're going there and the only person you actually interact with usually is the barista. And you're just sitting around other people without ever interacting with them. So it's very similar to being at home and interacting with no one, that loneliness and isolation. And the same thing happened in co-working spaces that we went to. They talk about community. They build these beautiful spaces with incredible branding, but most people are wearing headphones and avoiding eye contact. And so they call it community, but there's no intentional curation of it. And so what we're trying to do at Wayo is restore the original meaning of co-working, which is actual people working together and becoming more productive. And to your point, restaurants already do community better than anyone else. And so Wayo simply repurposes that environment. Restaurants are in phenomenal locations, and all of these hospitality spaces are more inspiring and energizing than traditional co-working.
I think that's a good point, and I think that we're definitely at a moment in time, which I suspect will continue well into the future, where people have a much greater appreciation of community and real community, as you were alluding to, not just sitting in a space with other people that have their headphones on. I think the greater utilization of AI and other technological devices counterintuitively, it drives, or maybe not even counterintuitively, it drives people with greater emphasis into social settings. And I think that's a wonderful thing. So I understand that perspective, and I absolutely understand the benefits from the restaurant's perspective. In terms of the audience of consumers who would want to utilize Wayo to book a event, what is that experience like? Who are some of those types of clients that you're reaching out to? How do you reach out to them? What are they looking for out of this tool?
Yeah, so we're starting out on the B2C side. And so, like we talked about, co-working is broken, and the missing piece is human energy. So people don't just crave a desk, they crave structure, energy, and community. And like we said, that's something hospitality spaces naturally provide. And from there, we've had a lot of those initial clients say, hey, my company may want this, and we're looking to be more of a solution on the B2B side for small startups and other types of medium businesses, potentially even larger companies who have distributed workforces and teams in different areas. And so, I'll tell you a story from my baseball days, which is when we played baseball, hitting is very contagious. And we would go games without getting a hit, and it seemed like no one on the team would get a hit. And sometimes it had to do with the pitcher. It's really good. Other times it was just our mental attitude. And in the same way that hitting is contagious, when the guy before you gets a hit, you elevate your game without even thinking. Work is the same way. And we see that at Wayo, where you're surrounded by 10 people who are locked in, you get locked in. And the number one thing we see from people who come to Wayos, which we did not expect ahead of time, it's the number one piece of feedback, even more so than the community, is that the fact that people who come and we turn them into better relationships. So we curate the community and we bring them together for different sessions. They have name tags. That creates accountability partners, and it elevates the productivity a lot of times by 50% to 100%. I mean, if you think about a lot of these people who are working remotely, there are a lot of distractions at home. It could be laundry, YouTube, and the same is true of a lot of isolated co-working spaces. But when we bring these people together and they see everyone else working extremely hard and very focused, they elevate their game. And so it's contagious in that way, and it elevates everyone who comes to be more productive.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, in addition to selecting venues, are you also curating the individuals who attend, or I was going to say content, but what else are you doing beyond selecting the venue to create this environment that is contagious that you just described? Because that also seems like a real value-added benefit to people who would participate.
Yeah, absolutely. So we select a lot of venues who have inspiring spaces. It could be a rooftop with amazing natural light and quiet areas in certain parts of it, or private rooms, or downstairs or an upstairs. But as you said, for these community days, or pod days, we call them, they're anywhere from 5 to 20 people. And so, the venue opens early. We welcome all the guests. They get coffee included most of the time. And we set seating up so that people can be extremely productive in the early hours. Most people have a lot of emails to go through and they want to start their day in a certain way. Around 10:45, say, on a community workday, we typically do a little who's in the room. So quick introductions, people know who's there. We also try to put them in a digital platform so they're able to connect with the people they meet in person after their workday. From there, it's as much quiet time as they want. They're able to interact with people when they want. And then we usually do a networking lunch, so people are able to organically interact with each other around 12:45, 1. And from there, it's structured time for deep work. And then say around 3:45, we try to bring people together in curated one-on-ones. It may be 5 minutes, 10, 15, and that is based on the information that they've given us on who they would want to interact with. And so we take the stress out of the whole networking idea. And from my perspective, there's a program called On Deck, and it's a fantastic program in San Francisco. When I go to networking events or happy hours, it's usually 2 hours and you're drinking and you give business cards to people, and it's surface level relationships. But what I learned from the On Deck program is when you spend a whole day with people, around other people, they open up at some point, and it's not the structured, facade that you get in very light interactions. People start opening up about their struggles and their issues, and you can take different pieces of that from someone else's struggles and someone else's industry and bring it to ideas in your own industry and your own business. And that's one of the big pieces of Wayo, is that people are working together for an 8-hour period, and they come back, the next week, for instance, and they can be around similar people and continue those conversations. And it really builds a lot more value out of the relationships than you would get in a simple happy hour.
And is there someone from your team, from Wayo's team, that's there to sort of facilitate the dialogue and facilitate those periods during the day when people are interacting?
Yeah, so for community work days where it's usually 10 to 20 people, one of our team members is present doing that. We're building a community ambassador program for some of the smaller pods where we have a certain venue. We're not necessarily present there, but it may be a themed pod. So people in restaurants, people in health tech, for instance, we have a workday scheduled for them, and say it's 6 people, and they're all able to meet there. And we give them the agenda and the prompts. Of course, anytime they need call area, it's there for them, and it's work, so they're on their own schedule. But we provide as much structure to that interaction as possible and try to guide it towards the most useful and value-driven outcome for the people who are there.
And I assume a lot of these restaurants, they're still going to have their normal course of business during one of these days. Is that correct?
Yes. That is one of our goals, is to maintain their operations so that they are not adding any overhead and they're not changing anything that would make their lives more difficult.
When did you launch this, Jason?
We launched this earlier this year, and we've had a lot of fun success on the consumer side. And as I mentioned, we're looking at expanding to many new venues so that a lot of the demand can book in the spaces that they really love in terms of atmosphere and amenities.
Also, what I like is a lot of people work in industries, either the nature of their industry or the nature of the company they work for, where they don't have a lot of opportunities to network. And, networking was something I was always adverse to, but I joined Vistage. Are you familiar with Vistage, what that is?
No.
So Vistage is a group, it's a nationwide organization. It's almost like the Young Professionals organization, where there's groups throughout the entire country. And, you get sort of invited in, and you'll be in a group that is comprised of 15 or 20 business owners, business leaders. So in my Vistage group, we've got the head of a real estate law firm in New York. We've got one of the key executives of Lowe's hotels, et cetera, et cetera. And we meet once a month and go through business issues. There's a leader that takes us through it. But the point being that, for me, it was a great way to push myself to do something I wouldn't do, and also puts you in an environment where you learn in ways you would not normally learn from people you might not normally meet. And so as I'm listening to you, there's probably a lot of people who may have a really great job that they enjoy with a great company, but it just doesn't afford them that type of an opportunity. And this is a way to almost, I don't want to call it, maybe it is a form of enhanced skills or enhanced training or something for them.
I couldn't have put it better myself. It sounds like a group that I would love to be a part of. And that's exactly our goal. I think a previous guest here, Pat Light, mentioned that networking is the most important trait for success in business. And obviously we value productivity ahead of anything, because that's what a workspace needs to be. And that's what our users get out of it. But he mentioned that you can get into any industry and steer conversations that make the other person feel like gold. Pat is extremely skilled at that. I listened to the podcast with him. But a lot of people don't find it that easy, or they're not naturally inclined in that way. And so our goal, just like the group you mentioned, is to make it easy for anyone on any day in a business setting to come to Wayo and meet the right people. No awkwardness, no trepidation, no stigma about introductions or anything like that. We curate the people around you, and you're working in this small group of highly motivated people who you have something in common. And exactly what Pat is talking about happens. Opportunities are generated organically. Careers can change in the best way possible. Businesses start, people are hired. There's no limit to what's possible in those types of settings that you're referring to.
It's really true. Like I was always, as the co-owner of Woolco and as the CEO, I was always more comfortable getting information through reading or watching YouTube videos or reading articles in magazines. And your comfort zone is not a good place to be. And I think there's two types of networking, at least. There's one where it's really very transactional and business oriented, such as when I send my sales team to a food show or to an event where there's going to be lots of restaurants. The objective there is to try to accumulate business relationships directly. But the other kind is what you described, and I think it really is valuable from somebody that was, just from a personality standpoint, adverse to it, and yet has derived enormous benefits. When you are around other people who are facing similar but not precise challenges or opportunities, you will learn, and you'll learn things that you didn't even know that you needed to learn. So I think that that's really cool. So now let's say that I'm an individual and I wanted to be involved in this. How would I interact with Wayo? Walk me through the process of how somebody who says, this sounds really good, would love to be a part of it. How would they engage with your company to facilitate something like that for themselves?
Yeah, so currently, if you go to wayo.club, we have a 60-second application process. Tells what industry you're in, who you're looking to interact with. And we take that information, and right now we're doing invite-only community workdays so that we are curating the people who are most likely interested in gaining value and meeting each other. In the new year, we'll have a full platform with different types of spaces up, different types of themed work days or pod days for small groups of people to work and, like you said, build community with. And so it will be more of a self-service platform where you're able to choose the days on the calendar that work best for you and book them and show up. And we curate that community for you and make sure that you're gaining the value from it and putting you in a digital platform where you're able to build on those relationships in a genuine way.
And from the perspective of the venue, how does that work? Is it simply that you're coming to the venue with such a compelling value proposition where you can say, look, we've done market research. We know that this type of venue, based upon its desired and explicit customer base, really isn't utilizing these times and spaces. I can get you events or individuals that are going to populate it during that time. How does it work from let's say a venue wants to participate? How do they get involved?
So if you go to wayo.club/hosts, it'll direct you to the Wayo Business platform, wayobusiness.com. And that's where hosts can join the platform and start listing their space. So typically we'll have a 10-minute call with them, understand their venue. A lot of times we'll go visit it to make sure it's the right space for a lot of the customers that we have on the B2C or B2B side. And it's very simple for the venues. We do not want to change their operations. We want to make their life easier. We want to make them more money, and we want to bring them more of their desired customers. So, that's in incremental revenue, new customers, and no disruption, because a lot of these, we don't want any extra overhead for them. And so it's a very simple process to onboarding, talking through a few of the logistics involved to make sure that it's ideal for the types of customers that they want and that we provide. And they list their space. honestly, we leave a lot of that hospitality to them because they are the experts. Restaurants, all of these types of hospitality venues, rooftops, a lot of bars have excellent private rooms that go completely unused and empty during the day. And so these are the best types of people to be serving these types of co-working remote workers.
And as I said when we began our discussion, whether it's bars that host trivia nights, whether it's this new sort of utilization, which is instead of trivia night, you have academics come and give a lecture on philosophy or archaeology. More and more hospitality businesses are beginning to wake up to the fact that they're in the venue business, regardless of their cuisine, regardless of their client base, regardless of how they envision themselves. It's just a matter of how do you unlock that in the most creative and efficacious way. Because I did a podcast as well, and you said something earlier that I think is really important. If you have a great restaurant, no matter what it is, you always want to be expanding the potential universe of customers. There are certain restaurants that are just so well known and have just such a niche, and they're always booked. That doesn't matter. That's a very small percentage. The rest of them are always looking for opportunities. And a lot of times, either through habit or through laziness or through inattention, they allow themselves to be needlessly pigeonholed. And they say, well, we're just a place for regulars, when in fact, they could be doing phenomenal business in corporate. Or we're really big with tourists, when in fact, they're located in an unbelievable neighborhood where they could really be marketing regulars. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts in terms of how a restaurant, in addition to signing up with you, they could really leverage being a participant in Wayo as a massively value-added marketing tool for their business? Not just the one day where they get to have consumers, but actually an opportunity to position themselves to be getting new consumers well into the future.
100%. We like to say that restaurants are the most beautiful co-working spaces in America, and they just don't know it yet. The biggest inefficiency typically we see in hospitality isn't just the cost, although Wilco can definitely help with that. It's the time. And just like you said, it's finding creative ways to use these incredible spaces more efficiently and for more hours during the day where we're not even increasing overhead. And so we think that future really belongs to hospitality, not just office landlords. So that's where we see it going. People are really craving that energy. And the restaurant between 9 and 5 is a multi-million-dollar opportunity hiding in plain sight.
I think so. And I think a lot of times it's important for those in the hospitality space to remind themselves how many of their key and core expenses are fixed, regardless of whether they're doing covers or not. Your electricity, your rent, for starters. So any type of business where you have fixed expenses of such a magnitude, and you can start generating revenue beyond what you're already generating that makes you profitable, that revenue goes right to the bottom line. So it's much better than even traditional revenue. I like what you said about the future of, I forget your exact words, but sort of juxtaposing hospitality spaces to offices. I think that is really something to be explored deeply, because from a qualitative standpoint, if a person just thinks about it in an expansive way, there is no difference between a conference room and a private room in a restaurant. It's just a matter of who gets to monetize that experience.
Exactly. And these hospitality venues have the food service. So a lot of places that you would work, a lot of offices, get a seamless membership for their employees, and it's delivered. But a lot of the spaces that we work with, you're getting a full service lunch with your workday, something that you wouldn't get even at the top firms in an office a lot of times. And so to your other point too, in terms of the marketing aspect, is we're bringing a lot of people who are big spenders in a lot of areas, business owners, professionals. And so these are customers who will talk about their experience at these venues. And that word of mouth generates a lot of new customers for these businesses that they may not have by just doing the standard lunch or the standard dinner.
Yeah. And I think that there's a growing need of, even in a place like New York City, perhaps especially in a place like New York City, what we think of as, I really was thinking about this, and you're right, what we think of as communal spaces can really just be spaces that drive home, in certain circumstances, that feeling of alienation or being alone, because you're around people, but there's no connectivity. And that's what people are really searching for when they're looking for it, particularly if they find themselves in a hybrid environment or work from home, or they're part of an organization where major headquarters is in a different state. I think this is really cool. Is there anything that I didn't touch on this subject in general that you would want to bring up, Jason? Because I'm thinking about it. It's a subject that I've thought about quite a bit myself and have done podcasts, but I think what you're in the process of bringing to life could really unlock something very important and very underutilized in the space.
I really hope that's the way it works out, because co-working from the demand side used to mean working with other people. Today it means just renting a desk and hoping someone talks to you in the kitchen. So if we're able to bring these experiences with Wayo, where people immediately feel a different energy, it's curated, it's intentional, it's business chemistry in motion, and create these moments and memories and experiences in these restaurants and hospitality venues, all of those people, not only are they more productive than they would be in other spaces, but those emotional moments and experiences then tie them in their mind and heart to those venues that they experience them in. And so that really creates a lot of loyalty for the businesses. And it means that these people are going to spread the word about them and bring in other ideal customers for the businesses.
What I will say is if this idea really grows, which I believe it will, I believe those hospitality businesses that are able to see the opportunity, and you touched on something really important, and you're cognizant of it, so it will be the case. So long as this is something that enables a restaurant or a bar or a coffee, whatever the venue is, to leverage their physical footprint during times when they're not doing business of consequence without incurring any additional cost or reputational negativity, so to speak, to their brand, there's going to be a massive first mover advantage here. I think it's very exciting. So I think that's very cool. So Jason, let me ask you, because we do have people that listen that are in the hospitality space, but also people that are entrepreneurs. If people have questions, whether it's about this or just wanting to pick your brain or something that struck their interest as they were listening, what is the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So people can get in touch with me at my email, jason.malefakis@wayo.club. That's MALEFAKIS. You can find me on LinkedIn. We talk about building real community in a world where most people feel disconnected, and how Wayo creates spaces where people work better and build more meaningful relationships. For people who want to sign up, wayo.club is the best place to do that. And we'll have an expanded offerings in the new year. And for businesses who want to host and list their space, you can go to wayo.club/hosts.
Very cool. That's what it's all about. That's what people want, is those meaningful connections. From a business standpoint, it makes all the sense in the world. So this was a really wonderful conversation, Jason. I very much enjoyed it. I think what you're pursuing here is very much needed and is very innovative. So I thank you for coming in. I really enjoyed this, and really looking forward to see it grow into the new year.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Absolute pleasure being on with you.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to The Profitable Table, fed by Woolco Foods. Please be sure to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast app. And to learn more about Woolco Foods or Stephen Toberoff, please visit us at woolcofoods.net.